Fist of the North Star. If the title alone doesn't stir your heart, well, then I guess you're in the right place. Here on Bonsai Pop, I like to talk about old anime. It's kind of our bread and butter. However, it's not so often we get to expose people to or revel in something as monumental as Fist of the North Star, aka Hokuto no Ken. This is a series that not only defined a genre, but a decade of Eastern animation, sporting characters that are still used in modern media to this day. Not to mention it's the 18th most profitable franchise of all time, right under Barbie and right over Toy Story, but honestly, that doesn't mean shit, and we all know it. However, Fist and Kenshiro and everything to do with this experience is truly something special, but don't take my word for it in the intro. I'm Mike, and this is why you should still watch Fist of the North Star. Let's get into it. Hi everyone. Did you know that pledging $1 to our Patreon pays for roughly 330 views on our channel? That would be watching every single video we've ever made 5 times. That means a single dollar would likely cover more than your lifetime of views on our channel. And if you give it to the Patreon, you get so much more in return. Bonus content, access to our private community, updates, podcasts, so much for so little. And when I say our patrons are the best people, I mean it. In over a year, we have never had a single issue on our server, and the community is alive and thriving. This is a Patreon-driven channel, meaning we pick topics specifically for us and our patrons. We talk to them daily, we hang out and play games with them, we do streams for them, everything that isn't specifically our Saturday video that you get here on YouTube. If you want to get the Bonsai Pop full experience, please consider joining the best community on the web by helping to support this channel's existence. All Patreon money is split between Tyler and myself for food and rent, and without it, we couldn't make content like this full time. Anyway, thanks so much for your consideration, and on with the show. Now, when people of culture think of post-apocalyptic anime, generally the first thing that comes to mind is Fist of the North Star and Kenshiro. Now, it wasn't the first series to take on this setting. That's arguably Violence Jack in the early 70s, another story we'll get into another time. However, Fist was the first to explode the way that it did. Heavily inspired by Violence Jack, Mad Max, and Bruce Lee, Hokuto no Ken is set in a world after a nuclear war wiped out civilization. The remnants of humanity fight for what food, water, and shelter is left in a never-ending wasteland filled with bandits and mutants. And honestly, that's pretty typical for the genre now, but when the original manga ran in 1983, much of this was uncharted territory. This was well before media giants like The Walking Dead crushed the worst enemy of humanity is humanity itself trope into the dirt. But what makes Fist stand out amongst the rest is inarguably its main boy Kenshiro and his fist, which is indeed of the North Star. You see, this isn't Fallout or The Road or The Walking Dead. Nah, this is that Japanese, which means it's wacky as fuck. Ken is master of Hokuto Shinken, literally meaning Big Dipper God Fist, which is a deadly martial art focused on the exploitation of people's 708 Kiraku Hiko, basically pressure points. But not in the cute Last Airbender way like Ty Lee does, nah. See, Hokuto Shinken is an art of assassination designed to disrupt the user's enemy from within to completely destroy them, resulting in something far more satisfying than a simple dead arm. Exhibit A. Now, if you think that's shocking now, imagine what it was like for the Jerry Curl Neanderthals who occupied the pre-internet 80s. This was something never seen before. This level of brutality and violence and pure badassery was cutting edge, exhilarating, and exactly my kind of jam. And while again, there were anime and manga in existence at this point which had reached and even surpassed this level of gratuitous people punishing, Fist of the North Star had something else going for it. Weekly Shonen Jump. And while its predecessors, Devilman and Violence Jack, were debuted in Weekly Shonen, Shonen Jump's preceding competitor, by the early 80s, Shonen Jump had firmly taken the top spot on the manga magazine charts. Compared to Weekly Shonen, Jump had a wider appeal, it had more female readers, and sported the best up-and-coming manga. Weekly Shonen had ceded the #1 spot to Jump in the early 70s, so neither Devilman nor Violence Jack had the same kind of reach as Fist of the North Star. This was also Jump's absolute heyday. In 1983, Dr. Slump and Cat's Eye were well into their series. Dragon Ball was right around the corner, quickly joined by City Hunter, Saint Seiya, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which are easily some of, if not the biggest names in manga history, which were all sharing the same magazine at the same time. However, rising above all of these in sheer brutality was Fist of the North Star, which popularized and coined its own class addendum of hyperviolence. Now, we happen to be a channel that listens to its audience, and we acknowledge that not everybody is into classic anime, and maybe some of you are new to the medium as a whole, and I get that. And at least in America, where classics are concerned, it generally takes a refined palate to get into things like Casablanca or Ninotchka or The Grapes of Wrath, or even classic cartoons like Hanna-Barbera, Heckle and Jekyll, Thundercats, or the original Transformers. However, anime has a much better shelf life than something like the Gummy Bears, for instance. The show, not the candy. Those things will last forever. Animation in Japan was always taken seriously and never aimed at only kids. In America, The Simpsons was arguably the first major animated show to break into the adult hemisphere, but Japan had been making groundbreaking animation with complex stories for decades before that. Corners weren't cut the same way in anime as it was in American cartoons because anime wasn't considered just for stupid kids who won't notice or just to sell toys. And all of this leads to shows like Fist of the North Star still holding up next to modern shonen greats like My Hero, and in my eyes, far surpassing them due to the raw nature of the time period. In the 80s, everything was hand-drawn, giving productions this timeless feel, but more so than that, anime at the time was still, in a way, discovering itself. This was a time before the major tropes we see throughout almost all anime that comes down the pipe now, a time when there was no road to follow, only to be paved, and trailblazing one of those roads was undeniably Fist of the North Star. You know, when the creator of something as intense as Berserk cites you as its main influence, you're doing something right. And right out of the gate, Hokuto no Ken dumps you into this wilderness without a really good clue of what's going on, and it pulls no punches, literally or figuratively. Kenshiro is immediately set up as an almost untouchable badass. I mean, besides having his main rival poke some pretty symbolic holes in his chest, well, main rival for the first part is a pretty long series. Anyway, Ken is initially on a revenge mission to reclaim his kidnapped fiancée Yuria, and in turn meets his young sidekicks Bat and Lin, whose main job is just watching him be a badass. However, it's the world in which this badassery takes place which makes all the difference. The wasteland is gross and grimy and filled with this sense of hopelessness as it's overrun by thugs and raiders with giant purple mohawks and no shits to give about who they're going to turn inside out next. In this unimaginable landscape, Ken is the one beacon of hope, quiet and determined and generally unstoppable. He wanders after his fiancée, helping where he can, which usually entails leaving bloody pools of refuse in its wake. Battle is truly where Kenshiro comes alive. His general low-key demeanor is instantly juxtaposed by his insane Bruce Lee battle cries and his deadly Hokuto Shinken. And every once in a while, if we're good, you get one of the most iconic catchphrases ever uttered by anyone ever.
お前はもう死んでいる。
You're already dead. Right before the dumbfounded Mohawk man he poked 100 times explodes in a mass of blood and gore. And like, I'm sorry, but that is the coolest shit I've ever seen. More importantly, that's something that can only truly be realized through animation, and this anime was where it was happening. And personally, I find telling somebody to check something out so they know their history never works unless that person is really into that. It's not a good sell because history isn't always fun. See Bridge Over River Kwai. History isn't what makes something great. Popularity isn't what makes something great. Being the 18th highest selling franchise of all time isn't what makes something great. What makes something great is intrinsic to its existence. It's a quality that can't simply be described, but instead needs to be witnessed. Part of what makes Fist so endearing and enduring is that you can enjoy it any way you'd like. Personally, I just throw on a random episode when I go to bed and let it play. I know no matter where I start, it's going to be awesome. It's a show with consistency. No matter what is happening in the overall story, you know that Ken is going to be kicking ass. But more importantly, he'll be fighting for the good of the world as an ethereal force of nature left over after the end of the world. I always found it enthralling that despite this being a dystopian future, a post-nuclear apocalypse sci-fi setting, it's a man and his fists that carve their way through the corruption. There is 100% a mysticism to Hokuto Shinken, which adds an Eastern fantasy element to this world, which is one of anime's greatest calling cards. Despite this being a setting that could arguably be anywhere, Fist is undeniably Japanese, and with that basis, the story is also undeniably Japanese. The idea of balance is extremely important in most Eastern philosophy, so naturally a world in chaos like the one of Fist of the North Star would eventually need to correct itself into a state of balance. And what we see is a wasteland controlled by those with the most power lording over the weak. However, it's ironically a single man slowly making his way through it that turns this anarchistic hellhole into a more livable place for the average person. Ken is stoic and determined. In a way, he's the epitome of what a post-nuclear Fallout warrior monk would be. He's the check to the powers in this world, and it's never-endingly fun to watch him come out on top, especially in a shower of guts and gore and brains and cartilage. Lin and Bat serve as his foils and add levity to the over-the-top violence and desperation of the world. And while the story isn't necessarily a happy one, I've always found a feeling of triumph in the end after making my way through it. And sometimes it just feels really good to watch some bad guys explode. The anime ran from 1984 to 1988 in 2 series, Fist of the North Star and the appropriately named Fist of the North Star 2, eventually capping out at 152 episodes. There's also a few movies, most notably Fist of the North Star, which was released in 1986. And I suppose the question would be where to start. And if I had to pick one, I would say probably that movie that I just mentioned. It'll give you the right idea of what you're gonna get with everything else. But if I was to give my honest opinion, I don't think it really matters. This is one of those rare series that can be enjoyed on multiple levels. You can watch it for the spectacle or the art or the nostalgia, or you can go in order for the story, which will give you all of the above, but take significantly more time. But most importantly, Banzai Pop wouldn't exist without Fist of the North Star. And when I look back on some of my favorite videos that we've made, Wicked City, Berserk, Ninja Scroll, Dorohedoro, Akira, none of these would have existed without the influence of Hokuto no Ken, which again holds up just as well as it would if it was made today. It's something that can and should be appreciated on many levels, not just as a historical series, but as a series that gave way for a generation of hyper-violent and boundary-breaking anime. And honestly, that's my favorite thing about anime, is how it continues to bend people's minds and go beyond what we would imagine into universes that seem to truly envelop you the deeper you get into them. And if anime is something that takes things to the next level, if it's something that breaks the boundary, if anime is punk rock cartoons, then Fist of the North Star is undeniably anime, and I don't think that the medium would be the same without it. So that is why I think that you should still watch Fist of the North Star. But if you're already a fan of the series, why don't you leave a comment letting people know why you think that people should still watch Fist of the North Star? I guarantee that you got opinions. Anyway, I'd like to take this time to just let you know that you, listening right now, are one of the very special few that actually make it to the end of a video, and that's an important thing. That means that not only did you enjoy it, but you're still watching. That's pretty cool. You would be really surprised how few people actually watch an entire YouTube video. So because of that, because you're here, I just want to say one more time to think about possibly joining our Patreon, like these 2 excellent individuals here. Our patron of the week, Paladin Patterson. My dude, thank you so much for being a part of the Patreon. And hopefully you're watching so you get to see your shout out as patron of the week. And second, of course, we always got to shout out one of our Super Saiyan gods, which is currently our highest tier. And this week, our raffle winner was Meg Rez right now. What's up? Thank you so much for being one of our Super Saiyan gods. The gods are the backbone of the channel. You guys are the ones that give so that we can give. And it is absolutely amazing. So thank you so much. Y'all are the best. Anyway, make sure to stay tuned. If you like this video and you're new here, definitely check out some of our other videos. I'm sure that we've covered more of your favorites. And if you enjoy those, maybe consider subscribing. As always, make sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at bonsai_pop and at twitch.tv, where I stream, that is /bonsai_pop there as well. I've been doing a Dark Souls 1 remastered playthrough, and it's been a lot of fun. We've had a very good time with that. Anyway, that's it for this one. My name is Mike. This is Bonsai Pop. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.